I'm Connie Baxter Marlow, and I'm interviewing my cousin, Rupert Baxter White, on the evolution of the quick frozen French fried potatoes, or QUIFFPO as it's known. And we're thrilled to be here with him, and let's hear what he's got to say. Thanks much.
Okay. The origins of our involvement with the potato go back to Hartland, Maine, and about 1939 we went into we were looking for a means to employ people during the winter and the off-season of canning. And so we opened a starch factory in Hartland, and that was fairly marginal. Actually, it used the cull potatoes of the farmers locally, and there were about 8,000 acres of potato land in the area of Hartland to East Corinth. A very good potato growing area. That was pretty marginal, and it morphed into the dehydrated potato when we built a dehydrator in Hartland during the Second World War, and supplied the government with dehydrated potatoes. We continued that after the war, but the sales were limited to pretty much to canners of corned beef hash and that sort of thing, seafood chowder, products, other canned products that people made that were perhaps they didn't want to handle a lot of fresh potatoes. That was a nuisance. So the dehydrated potato was very adapted to canning specialty products. Anyway, when World War II ended in 1945, we had developed the canned potato. The canned potato was interesting because up to then it couldn't be canned because it would slough in the cans. The potatoes would break down. And the low gravity potatoes were available in the area. Again, the B grade or below grade potatoes that were thrown away in the deal areas like the Delmarva area. They had no use for them, so they were simply fed to cattle or otherwise disposed of. So we discovered that by adding a little calcium to the can, a calcium tablet to the can, we could prevent the potatoes from sloughing. So in 1946 and 47, we had a monopoly on the canned potato, and we were shipping about 250,000 cases nationwide, and that was very good. But of course, eventually, other areas figured out what we were doing, and the Delmarva area in particular, because those potatoes were typically thrown away after they shipped all the fresh product, the good big potatoes, during what's called the deal. Then they had this residue which was available to them with very little cost. So they became pretty heavy competitors, and shipping rates began to impact the sales of our product, because we were shipping from northeastern Maine, and other producers were producing in areas that had much more favorable freight rates. Anyway, that was declining in the 40s. So we were looking for another Another area of potato usage or another product that we could do year round. We had baked beans, but we were in a partnership with Monmouth Canning Company for baked bean production, and we didn't participate in the actual production of them. So that was out. And what we did come across was the idea of freezing the frozen French fry. We had gone into the frozen food business in 1936 with Birdseye, in collaboration with Birdseye, and supplied them with peas, beans, and corn at Corinna, which we had converted to a freezing plant. During the period from the end of World War II to early 1946, we developed the frozen French fry and decided in 1946 early to build a plant in Corinna capable of producing French fries year-round. And that was facilitated by a $200,000 loan, long-term loan from Merchants National Bank in Boston. Seems like a very small amount now, but it was a big deal in 1946. And in conjunction with that, we had the help of Opie Pearson, who was an engineer from Aroostook County and had helped in developing the machinery that we needed to produce the frozen French fries. Earlier on, we had obtained a patent on a method of peeling the potatoes called from the Fodla, which we licensed to the Fodla Company, and we used their steam peeler for peeling the potatoes. In Idaho, they developed the lye peeling, and in the long run, that was much more successful. But anyway, Opie and Fran Saunders were very instrumental in developing the product. Fran had been working for the USDA, and we hired him along the way to work in the French fry area. And in 1946, all our product was sold to Birdseye. We simply didn't have the national sales available to us. And also, Birdseye had, I believe, these had developed the plate freezer, which we used up until about 1960. The plate freezer was a method of quick freezing the product, and it was effective, but it was superseded by the blast freezer, which was on a continuous belt, which was much more efficient. We went to that in 1960, I believe. Anyway, the product took off, and each year the demand for it expanded tremendously until about 1960. I believe the national production hit well over 1 billion pounds a year. We also developed a method of controlling the color of the French fry by the addition of sugar to even out the color of the product. This is very important in both French fries and potato chips because if you have burnt-looking potatoes in your mix, it looks pretty unattractive. So it's desirable to have a uniform color. Gradually, Birdseye eventually built a plant in Caribou, where they had been producing peas, and they enlarged that and made it a year-round plant to produce frozen French fries. So our sales to Birdseye were cut in half, and we started to develop our own brands and our own sales department for that product. Eventually, Birdseye moved all of their production to their own plants, and we eventually managed to develop a fairly good regional I can't think of the word, a regional sales area that allowed us to continue to expand. In 1960, when things got rough because of the construction of new plants in Aroostook County, we concentrated more on the institutional trade for restaurants and institutions, and we managed to lower our costs to a point where we became very efficient. Although we lost a lot of money between 1960 and 1963, by 1965, we had trimmed our operations down to a point where we were extremely efficient. We had a good market and a good product and a good infrastructure. We had always had to import about half our potatoes from Aroostook County, which was a disadvantage. The local area could only supply about half of what we needed, so half of what we needed had to come from the county and was trucked down. The local area of about 8,000 acres of planted product produced about half of what we needed. We got about half of that. About half of it went to chips and the fresh market, which the farmers sold to directly. So that's about it on the.
So then in 1965.
Well, that's the transition when we sold out to Weston. But I think you've already covered that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the end of Snowflake Canning Company at that point?
I think they continued under that name probably until 1968 or 9 when the fire occurred. But actually, one of the things that attracted us to them was the fact that we went back to 1888, and by buying Snowflake Canning Company, they could claim to have roots going back to 1888, which they enjoyed.
Yeah. So Lamb Weston operated, and my father went to Lamb Weston. Jack Baxter went to Lamb Weston and ran their food division and stayed running Snowflake Canning Company,
Well,
essentially. I mean, because it was still running here.
well,
Under
it was
Lamb Weston?
I think it was. I don't know, but in any case, they owned the corporation, so therefore, it really doesn't make any difference. So I assume they continued the Baxter label for some time, the Snowflake label.
Uh-huh. And then a fire occurred in Corinna.
Yeah, and that ended it.
So what actually happened?
Well, then all their production had to come from the West.
And what happened in the fire in Corinna? What was the circumstances of that fire?
Well, the old plant was used to make co-products. Co-products being frozen mashed potato, what we call temptators, or Ida calls tater tots, shredded potato patties, which is a fairly popular item, and potato flakes for instant mashed potatoes. So there was one deep fryer in that section, and of course the fumes of the fat had pretty well permeated all of the buildings over the years with all this French frying going on, and that particular vat didn't have a fire suppressor over it. In the main building, all of the fryers had equipment over them to put out a fire should a fat fire start, and that's what happened in the co-products building. Unfortunately, there was a connection between a conveyor belt that ran from between the two buildings, and the fire got out of control in the co-products building and managed to cross over into the main building. Beside the building was on the other side was the blast freezer, which wasn't particularly inflammable. And then beyond that was the raw material area, the potato house, and conveyor. Those potatoes were conveyed through a water channel into the main frying house, which caught fire. So the blast freezer and the potato house did not burn. The blast freezer was ruined, of course, by the fire, but fortunately, the potato house did manage to survive, and that contained part of the offices, and so some of the records were retained.
And that was the end of the operation.
That was the end of the operation.
Yeah. One thing, could you tell us a little about the invention of the potato flakes? Didn't H.C. Baxter and Brother invent the potato flake or snowflake canning?
I wouldn't say we invented that. We were working on that in 1957 and 1958 on an experimental basis. And in 1959, we were collaborating with the Borden Company, and we produced some product that year. But in 1959 to 1960, Borden was trying to supply the country with this and get in on. We were very early in this business, so we built a plant in Heartland next to the potato flake plant, which was guaranteed by Borden. And we produced quite a bit. I can't remember the figures, but it was a big operation, employing 300 or 400 people year round.
The potato flake operation.
Yeah. But the following year, Borden decided to build their own plant in North Dakota, and Heartland was not efficient because we had to import all the potatoes, essentially. We were already using more than the area could produce in Corinna. And of course, being in Maine, we were at a disadvantage freight-wise for shipping into the Midwest and the West, the South even. And also the specific gravity of Maine potatoes generally in those days was very low, and you needed high specific gravity potatoes to make potato flakes efficiently. Maine had, unfortunately, because of the potato subsidy in the 40s, Maine developed a habit of growing tremendous quantities of potatoes that were of absolutely terrible quality and were dyed purple and sold to the government and dumped. And that really set Maine back a long ways, because now Maine has concentrated on the agronomy and on the potato varieties and developed potatoes that do conform to the need for high specific gravity and therefore make much better product, both in French fries and in dehydration, but not in canning. Canning is limited pretty much to low gravity potatoes, which is why one of the reasons why we were able to do that, and why they don't can potatoes much in Idaho or in the West. They're all canned in the Delmarva area.
Where's that, the Delmarva area?
Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia.
Oh, huh. Okay. Yeah.
So anyway, that's pretty much what happened with the potato flakes.
Yeah, because I remember going to Heartland and seeing the big rollers with the potato flakes coming off the big rollers. It was amazing.
Yeah, it was great for 1 year, but it didn't last because Borden pulled out, and we weren't in a position to compete. We did move one of the drums over to Corinna and produce potato flakes there using the effluent, the chips and small cuts of potatoes that had been up to then taken to a local pig farmer and used to raise pigs, but this was a much better use, and the cost was competitive because we really weren't paying for the raw material. So
because it was
what had formerly been just waste.
Right. Right. Now tell me something about the soils in Maine. I had heard that Maine couldn't compete with the West because of the thin soils on the granite.
Well, it can't compete because of the lack of good acreage that is flat and easy to the caribou catina, which is the type of soil in the Tri-City area in Aroostook County, is very favorable, and that also is what makes the area from East Corinth over to St. Albans so attractive, because it is good.
Oh, it is good soil. So I was misinformed.
Ledge is a problem because in a drought condition it dries out very quickly and you have to irrigate. And also the hills are a problem. Aroostook County is not flat, and neither is the area around Corinna. So that is a minor thing. And of course, the final thing is shipping costs.
Shipping costs, right.
Which are very important.
Yeah. So it's not the soils that led to the demise ultimately. It was the shipping costs and competitive.
I think part of the shipping costs has always been a big factor, and I believe that the agronomy, the development of suitable varieties of potatoes was lacking because of the government subsidies that the local farmers availed themselves of, rather than trying to improve their product and improve their markets. So that's I guess.
Yeah, you are a treasure trove of information, Rupy. Amazing. Thank you so much. And do you have any other thoughts of anything that needs to get archived?
I think we've pretty well covered it.